Hello and welcome back to Rambling Rogues, a podcast for indie authors. It's part 2 of our special series focusing on our upcoming anthology, Tales of the Seasons. If you haven't already, please pre-order that now. There'll be a link in the description and you can support indie authors by doing so. So this week we're focusing on summer and we've got a story from Christopher Cisneros.
Blood Red. Story by Christopher Cisneros. 1956. Los Angeles, California. The city was in the grips of a heat wave, the worst in recorded history for the City of Angels. It was mid-August, and there seemed to be no escaping Dante's Inferno. It was a little past 10 p.m., and a blood-red moon hung high in the sky. My name is Jack Rabbit, and I'm what the dime novels call a Seamus. I'm also bleeding to death on the tarmac of an abandoned airfield, with Lon Chaney Jr. at my side, dead. Well, how did I get here, you might ask? Well, as I wait for the cavalry to arrive, late as usual, let me entertain you with that tale. Earlier tonight, I was in my office, poring over the mounds of bills which had piled up on my desk. Bills like those sent my old man to an early grave. That and a whole lot of hooch. A Chesterfield dangled from the corner of my mouth, the falling ash burning tiny holes in the papers. There was a rap at my door. I knew it was Simone, my secretary. She had a style of knocking, slow and sexy. "Come in," I hollered. The door squeaked open, and Simone stuck her head in. "I'm out of here, boss. That is, unless you need anything," Simone said in her mousy southern twang. I shook my head. She came in and silently hovered over me. I looked up at her. Even in the dim light, she looked pretty, like Jean Harlow. Her hair was the color of a harvest moon, and her skin like snow-covered mountaintops. Her eyes were green and sparkled like gems. "How are your ears?" she asked. "They're still clogged. I've tried everything short of going to the doctor," I answered, and returned to the bills. "Are you afraid of the doctor?" she chuckled. "No, I'm afraid of his bill." "So what time are you headed out?" "In a bit. I just need to John Hancock a few things for the mail tomorrow." Simone was fidgety, kept shifting her weight. I looked up at her again. "What's up, Simone?" "Just wanted to know if you had any plans for tonight." "Sure I do," I replied. "I'm going home to take a cold shower, get drunk, and pass out. How about you?" "Well, there's a Bela Lugosi picture on the Late Show, and I was sort of wondering." "Lugosi? Didn't he just die?" She nodded and continued. "Do you want to come over to my place? Watch it with me? I hate watching scary movies alone." The animal in me wanted to jump over that desk and ravage her. I hadn't been with a woman in such a long time that I had begun to forget what it was like. But Simone was my friend. When she came to work for me, we were just employer-employee. But one day, she walked in, looking like she'd gone a couple of rounds with Rocky Marciano. The chick was like a degenerate gambler when it came to picking fellas. No luck. I went out, found the guy, gave him the broad whip with the butt of my gat, and warned him that if he went to the cops, I'd paint the walls with his blood. Simone never heard from that creep again, and has looked at me as her protector ever since. I crushed my cigarette out in the ashtray and shook my head. I could read the disappointment in her face like a grim fairy tale. She nodded, half smiled, and made for the door. "You still got that piece I gave you?" I asked as she held the doorknob. She turned, her face hidden by shadows, and tapped her purse. "Can't be too safe. with that maniac loose out there. He killed again, she shuddered. The cops will get him. Sally Rodriguez is heading the task force. But until then, hold on to the gun. Simone waved and walked out, shutting the door behind her. I lit another cigarette, turned in my swivel chair, and peeked out the blinds. Below, Simone walked towards her red 1948 Packard convertible. She started the thing, and with a puff of dirty black smoke, was off into the night. I did consider the possibility of Simone and I, but it would have never worked. She's too clean and innocent-like. My women have to be dirty. That's why I'm still single. Like Simone, I ain't got no luck either. I hated taking a piss in my own restroom. Simone had it decorated with all sorts of brightly colored towels and scented soaps, which I'm not allowed to use because they're just for show. So I'm always wiping my hands on my pant legs, a habit that has extended beyond the office. I caught my reflection in the mirror and saw just how much life had beaten me down. I'd obviously seen my reflection many times before, but I guess I chosen never to really see myself. I was disheveled and badly out of shape. I'd simply stopped caring. I joined the force shortly after the war and was fit, trim, and ready to conquer the world. I was smart, too. Made homicide in only a few years and solved my share of cases. When I discovered corruption at the highest levels, I exposed it, brought down some top dogs. But instead of becoming a hero, I became a target, one of the hunted. I was framed for stealing city funds. A bogus paper trail led straight to me, and I was drummed out of the force. I tried to fight, but I lost. My wife left me shortly after that, took everything with her on the way out. Now I chase philanthropers and insurance frauds for a living. It's all routine. Nothing new ever happens. I turned out the desk lamp, made for the door, but before I could get there, someone knocked. There was urgency in that knock, maybe even fear. A silhouette appeared against the frosted window. It was curvy with long flowing hair. She knocked again. I opened the door and the woman on the other side jumped. She had all the beauty of a Southern California Latina. Her eyes were mysterious and piercing, her lips as red as the blood in my veins, and her hair dark like midnight. "And what can I do you for, ma'am?" I asked, looking her up and down. She was a tiny thing, just a bit over 5 feet, so I reckoned, and dressed to the nines in a black dress with a red cape and flats. In her trembling hands, she held a little purse. Are you Jack Rabbit?" she stuttered. "I am. May I have a word with you?" "Can it wait till morning, Mrs. Lucinda Blanco? And no, this is urgent. Please, I just need you to hear me out." Her eyes begged for just a moment of my time. So without saying another word, I stepped aside and let her in. I offered her some bad coffee and a cigarette. She took two. I sat on the corner of my desk and watched her pace back and forth, puffing away like a choo-choo. She choked down the brew, finished one cigarette, lit the other, before she asked, "Have you read the papers?" I raised my shoulders a bit. "So you've heard of the moon maniac?" she asked behind a thin veil of smoke. "Well, who hasn't?" "I know the identity of the killer," she murmured. I stood up, headed for the door, and held it open. "It's time for you to leave, lady." "You don't believe me?" "That don't matter. If you have any information on the killer, or if you think you do, that's a matter for the police, not for me. But I need your help, Mr. Rabbit. You see, I strongly believe that the killer is, My husband. Tell it to the cops, I said, signaling her out with my thumb. I tried, but they wouldn't believe me. That's why I came here. She sat at the edge of the chair and ran her palms across her legs. Those legs, strong, tanned, and healthy. Well, why didn't they believe you? They said I was being paranoid. So I came here because you helped one of my friends out once. Sally Mankey? Yeah, the redhead with the cheating zookeeper husband. She nodded and said, I thought Nick, my husband, was having an affair. I told Sally about it, and she gave me your card. Lucinda pulled out one of my cards from her purse and flashed it at me. It was an older card with a cartoon rabbit dressed like Sherlock Holmes. I wanted you to tell him for me, but a few nights ago, as he went out, I decided to follow him myself, she continued. I followed him to the old Chaplin airfield where he jumped the fence. I managed to squeeze through the gates and followed him in. I was afraid, but had to find out what was happening. And what was your husband up to, Mrs. Blanco? I asked, sticking a finger in my ear, trying to unclog it. I don't know. All I found were his clothes piled up in a neat stack. So he changed his clothes. I don't see how that connects him to the moon maniac. That was the night of the first murder, Mr. Rabbit. I took a sip of coffee, gagged, and choked out. Could be just a case of wrong place at the wrong time, Mrs. Blanco. It would be, but each time that he went to that airfield, another murder would occur. You didn't try to confront him on it? She shook her head and said, I was too scared. And the police didn't at least offer to look into the matter? Not after I told them what I'm about to tell you next. A few minutes of uncomfortable silence went by before she continued with the rest of her story, which really went off the rails. I could see why the police thought she was a kook. Pretty, but kooky. However, the detective in me picked up some sincerity in what she was saying. Even if I thought her story was bunk, she believed every word. Lucinda Blanco offered me $300 to go with her to her house and wait. For what? She wouldn't say. All she told me was that I would be a believer before the end of the night. 300 berries to babysit a pretty girl, easy money, right? And if her husband was the moon maniac, I could nail him. Perhaps I could even get back a little of what was lost when this city crashed down on me. I told her to run along home and that I would join her in an hour. She wrote her address down on a napkin, gave me a tight hug, and whispered, Thank you, Mr. Rabbit. Sure, I replied, and walked her to the door. I went home to my one-bedroom apartment, took a cold shower, ate a ham cheese sandwich on stale bread, drank it down with a shot of whiskey, and fed my pet rabbit, Sinatra. I put on some fresh clothes, loaded my gun, and was out the door. I took the 405 to Mission Hills, where Lucinda Blanco lived. It was a bit of a drive, so I had some time to run through her story again. Her husband was an archaeologist at the university, and 2 months back he had been out of town on some dig in the Sonoran Desert. Developers discovered an Indian burial ground out there, so the school sent him to check it out. He was gone for only 3 days, but when he returned, Lucinda said he was different. He'd developed insomnia, would inexplicably leave the house at night, and was prone to bouts of violence. I made it to the Mission Hills area, just as a thick fog blanketed the city like a burial shroud. It took me a little longer than I had promised, but I was there. The address she gave me was in a neighborhood lined with adobe homes made to look like an old Mexican village. Lucinda's ebony eyes were on my mind when something large leapt in front of my car. Panic-stricken, I jerked the wheel from right to left, trying to avoid the collision, and crashed into a concrete barrier. I forced the driver's side door open and spilled out onto the road. Blood trickled into my eyes from a gash on the top of my head. My world was a blurred mesh. I propped myself up against the wreck, took a few deep breaths, and caught the scent of a wild beast. That's when I saw a hulking figure in the middle of the road, silhouetted against the streetlights. It stood still as a statue, baring its teeth and cutting me to shreds with its crimson eyes. I reached into my coat pocket for my .38, took one half-assed shot at it, hitting it square in the jaw. But that only made it angry. It leapt at me, but I managed to squeeze off another round, hitting it in the chest. It rolled across the road to the gutter, where it shook off the blast and disappeared into the brush. I staggered to my feet like a hophead, braced myself up against the car. Lucinda's house was across the street, so I staggered to the door and banged on it. No answer. I tried the knob, and the door came open. It was darker than a villain's heart inside. My gun drawn, I called out for Lucinda, but got no reply. I searched the walls like a blind man for the light switch. When the lights came on, I saw that the place was a battlefield. There was broken furniture everywhere, some reduced to splinters. Glass crunched under my shoes, and blood stained the walls. My heart pounded in my clogged ears as I took in the horrific sight. I followed a blood trail to the back bedroom, where the door barely clung to the hinges. With one swift kick, I knocked it down. I turned on the lights, found Lucinda on the floor, and rushed over to her. I took her in my arms. She was a bloodied mess, but still breathing. "Don't worry, love. I'm going to call for an ambulance," I said, my lip trembling. The sight of this beautiful creature, broken and helpless, ripped the heart out of my chest. The flame in her eyes was going out. She was pale from the blood loss. "Please stop him, Jack. He can't do it himself," she said with a mournful gasp. She pressed an old cigar box to her chest like a newborn baby and said weakly, "This is the only way." Tears welled in her eyes, and the last words she spoke to me were, "Thanks for not letting me die alone." She took one deep breath and was gone. The cigar box dropped, and its contents spilled across the floor. 4 silver bullets. I returned to the living room, called Sally Rodriguez, and told her everything. She said that the police were on their way to the Blancos' residence and ordered me to stay put until they arrived, but I ignored her and headed out. I took Lucinda's car and raced to the Chaplin Airfield, an abandoned airstrip where movies were shot during the silent film era. My mind was like scrambled eggs. What the hell was that thing on the road? What connection did it have with Lucinda and her husband? The conclusions I was coming up with didn't make any sense. Still, to play it safe, I loaded my gun with the silver bullets. I crashed through the front gates, onto the tarmac, and went on the hunt. The moon hung low, full and bright. I crept around, searching for God knows what. I was sweating profusely. The air was hot, dry, and hard to breathe. The fog had gotten thicker, and I could see only as far as the end of my arm. A sense of dread overcame me, and I began to shake. I remembered the moment Lucinda first showed up at my door, how she shook like this. She had already seen what I was about to. A heavy, hair-covered hand struck me in the chest and sent me flying several feet back. I was winded, paralyzed by pain, but worse, I lost my gun in the fog. I was grabbed, lifted several feet into the air, and tossed aside like a cheap date. This was repeated a few more times before I fell belly down, staring at my gun. It glistened in the red streaks of moonlight which broke through the fog. Behind me, I heard guttural growls. I could smell that wild beast odor. The monster stalked towards me, dragging its claws along the pavement like metal. I reached out, grabbed my gun just as it grabbed me. We were now face to face. Its fangs were white, sharp, and eager to finish me off. In its eyes, I detected a faint hint of humanity. As it opened its jaws wide and pulled me in for the death bite, I shouted, "Nick!" The monster stopped and sniffed me. "Lucinda loved you, Nick." "You killed her for it," I said, choking on my own blood. He dropped me, turned to that red moon and howled at it, cursing it, perhaps, for cursing him. I aimed my gun, I said. I couldn't save her, but I'll save you. I fired all 4 bullets into him. He staggered back, hit the ground hard. His chest heaved, and he whimpered like a hurt dog. Nick lay on the tarmac, motionless, naked, and curled up in the fetal position. My ears finally popped, and I could hear the police sirens breaking the silence of the night. Red lights flashed all around me, and Sally Rodriguez appeared like an angel. We found hard evidence connecting Nick Blanco to the moon maniac, she informed me as she held my hand. Mrs. Blanco didn't make it. They're taking you to St. Jude's Hospital, hero. I was rolled off to an ambulance. But before I was put in, I took one last peek at that summer moon and whispered to myself, hero, and closed my eyes. The end.